Well, let's get started. I think we have critical mass and we'll have some more folks trickling in as we move on, but we only got an hour and we got a lot of slides and information to get through. So why don't we jump into it? Thank you everyone for attending our panel today. We'll be talking about strategies, tools, and tips for operationalizing your annotation journey. We can go to the next slide, you may. We'll start with a few polls. Hopefully we can get the juices flowing, get everybody a little bit engaged via some in-Zoom polls. And then we've got a great panel assembled today. Everybody has a few slides. We'll do some presentations, and then we'll move into some discussion and open Q&A. So let's go to the polls. These will pop up on your screens, everyone. So take a moment to read them and please fill them out. We'd love to kind of get some background on who's here. I think we can display the results whenever. What's the poll so far? We can pull up the results anyways, I think it will update in real time. So everybody should be able to check out the results on their computer. The first question was, how would you characterize your organization's relationship to clinical AI today? We are and it looks like we've got a mix between vendors, platforms, research institutions, data collection companies, and none of the above. Also looks like an interesting mix on the data collection function maturity side, skewing towards probably earlier stage. We're just getting started and could be better. I'm curious who is the well-oiled machine, but we can revisit that later. Please start recording if you get a moment. And then in your priority list, where do improvements to data collection currently sit? Looks like we've got a good skewing towards number one or at least top 3 or top 10. Let's keep that in mind as we move forward. Well, thanks. We can jump to presentations. So as I mentioned, we've got a really great group of panelists on the line, everybody. They'll be talking through a few slides just sort of frame a problem and talk through how they think about data collection and its application to the real world and model development. Our first presenter, we can go to the next slide, is Erik. Erik is co-founder and CEO of Centaur Labs. So Erik, we'll kick it over to you for your slides.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm going to spend a couple minutes telling you about a project we recently did related to COVID. And in particular, highlight the problem of making sure you ask the right questions and define the requirements for a labeling task. So just a little bit of background. So Centaur Labs, we help do high quality labeling of data specifically for people developing medical AI. We do this a little bit differently than most other companies. So we have an app called DiagnosUs that you can download on the App Store right now if you have an iPhone. And that lets us collect labels from a crowd of skilled users who compete to label your task most accurately. So users will respond to a bunch of cases. We will evaluate the quality of their labels, compare them to other people, and then they are only rewarded and win cash prizes if they rank better than other labelers at the task. So this gamified model means that quality control is sort of naturally built in. So users are always trying their hardest. They're there to win and prove that they are good at this task. They are not there because they're an hourly employee who's trying not to get fired. They're trying to make sure that they are the very best every time they look at a case. And users are also only rewarded if they are excelling at your labeling task. So, you know, users are self-selecting into tasks that they are good at. There's a range of things you can do, you know, chest X-rays, text classification, and things like that. And we don't really care if you come, you know, think of a med student that comes and likes that they can learn and engage with the app. But if they aren't incredibly talented at it, then great, it's an educational tool for them. It's fun for them, but, you know, they're not costing you money. Move to the next slide. So since I know most of the people here are interested in radiology, and what I'm about to show you is a sort of an interesting text use case. I just wanted to say that, you know, we do all sorts of labeling stuff, including, you know, 3D images. We have a DICOM viewer in there. This I thought was going to be a GIF, but basically, you know, this is a segmentation task on a brain MRI where you can also change the contrast on the left. So I just wanted to point that out before moving forward and using this different example to highlight how hard it is to define the labeling task. So I'm going to talk about a project we recently did with a company called Fragmented. They provide content interpretation and moderation services for online platforms with artificial intelligence. They saw what was happening with COVID and the spread of medical misinformation around COVID, and they wanted to help tackle this by targeting social networks like Twitter and seeing if they could develop and apply their AI to identifying medical misinformation. So they came to us with this task where they wanted to identify tweets for whether they had medically harmful misinformation, other misinformation, both types of misinformation, or none. It's fine. So, you know, here's a few different examples. These aren't that difficult. The task seems pretty straightforward. So, you know, total coronavirus cases at this time, 2.5 million, et cetera. Is that true? You know, one of our labelers, whether they're a nurse or a doctor or a med student all around the world, they can look that up and confirm that using their skills and expertise that it, you know, that appeared to be true at the time. Some of these other tweets, though, pretty clearly not as true. So this one all the way on the right, the coronavirus app uses location services to let the Illuminati know when you're near 5G so they can zap you with a cancerous rays. If you don't know, you ignorant. So we've classified that as other misinformation. So I don't know if you can hear, my dog is having a bad dream in the background is what's going on, if you hear funny sounds. So the task seems pretty straightforward. And lots of people that need labeling work, they think the task is much more straightforward than it is. Because it's pretty easy to think about what you want. In the end, I want hemorrhages segmented in brain lesions. In brain scans. I want tweets labeled for medical misinformation. But it gets very tricky when you get into the weeds of it. So if you can move to the next slide. So what about tweets? You know, what do you do about sarcasm that references misinformation? Metaphors, gibberish, completely unrelated content that might be, you know, misinformation now. If what you're trying to do at the end of the day is train an AI that can help identify tweets for medical misinformation related to COVID, I mean, what do you do about a tweet like this one here from Daniel? 5G giving us the coronavirus, which with a bunch of, you know, scary faces and question mark faces. You know, I'm no emoji expert, but it seems clear to me that this person doesn't actually think that 5G causes coronavirus. So they're sort of saying like, you know, this is shocking and like, what, are you sure? So you can imagine if what you want to do is moderate content, you really don't want to remove someone who's just engaging in a conversation or who's making a joke or something like that. You really don't want to you know, classify something as medical misinformation when it's not. So the solution that we normally go with is defining gold standards and identifying edge cases early on. So we found time and time again, no matter how long and detailed your instruction document is, there are always going to be edge cases that you don't expect, that where the client needs to engage and sort of further communicate what it is they actually want. So this requires an upfront cost of creating a data set, a small data set of gold standards that is going to cover, you know, your problem space here. So it depends on a bunch of factors, whether it's a classification task, how many classes there are, whether it's a segmentation task, how many you need, and how diverse the cases are in your situation. But we found that time and time again, investing in really getting into the weeds of the labeling task and doing a few hundred and setting the gold standards is pretty necessary, because otherwise what happens is the labelers are going to have an inconsistent understanding of where threshold values are, what medical misinformation is. If someone tweets Donald Trump is a virus, is that medical misinformation? And the labelers are, obviously going to have different opinions about how to handle situations like that. So you really need to think about what you want your AI to be like in the long term and plan through some of those examples. And the only way you can identify some of these edge cases is really going through it yourself and sort of setting the rules of the game. So instead of just having a long instruction document, it's about having examples that the labelers then see, they get feedback on, and they learn by doing and by seeing these examples. So really quickly, another example here, in the medical image domain. So researchers at Memorial Sloan Kettering, they wanted us to label these dermatology images for the presence of a ruler or ink. So this is a pretty straightforward example of something that seems like, yeah, I don't even need instructions. Like, it's just obvious. Just label it if there's ink or a ruler. We also thought this was quite obvious. So we just put our labelers to the task until we found a bunch of weird use cases. It's like if you look at the next slide now. So labelers started to flag cases where we were like, what is going on here? There's clearly no ruler here. This task is extremely easy. And what it is since our labelers are competing with each other to do extremely well at the task, they pick up on things that we would never dream of. So here's an example of a case. We're telling the crowd to label instances of rulers. And we had initially had this image labeled as not having a ruler, and then workers started to complain, hey, I'm being told I'm wrong in this game when I see this little ruler here. So if you see the zoom in, you can see the hash marks of what is starting to look like a ruler here. It clearly is a ruler if you zoom in. Now, do you actually want that ruler identified or not? It's, it's up to the developer, but you really need to have examples so you can come across these use cases in the future. So this is also important for coming up with, say, threshold events. So again, if you're trying to identify opacities in a chest X-ray, the workers are going to do a really good job at replicating what they are instructed to do and at following the lead of examples. But we all know that there's threshold values, things that could either go either way, that could go either way. Is this an opacity or not? Is this a problem or not? And you really need to experience a range of examples in order to sort of figure out what those threshold values are. So anyway, that's pretty much the takeaway that I wanted to, give everyone here is just, however straightforward your labeling task you think it is, you really need to engage with the data more than just a few examples in order to make sure that you're getting the results you want from the workers, because they're going to do the task very well, but defining the task is always harder than you think. So that's it for me, and I'll look forward to questions later on in the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Erik. Just before we move on, a reminder to everyone that there's the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll be using that for participation and soliciting questions later. You can upvote and downvote questions in there. So please use that as the panelists go through. So we'll move along to Marie, who is both a clinician and CEO of NETR. We were lucky to get her time today. Marie, please take it away.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about labeling and structuring unstructured data sets, because basically that's what we're doing at NETR. Just to put it on a frame, NETR is a platform between healthcare facilities and medtech companies or pharmaceutical labs, which is dedicated to collect data within hospitals and to label unstructured data. And I'm going to show you, or try to show you, that that's probably where we can find some value on it. Can you put the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So basically, the hypothesis where we are is that data is really fragmented in the hospitals and in the healthcare facilities, and we try to make some big data with medical IT, which is not made to make big data, but just to cure patients, which is very, very different. And this unstructured data, which is in the hospitals, is locked in the hospital, and we don't use it. So basically, we have to find a way first to extract the data from the hospital and then to label it properly and in the most accurate way. So what we have seen over the last few months is that patient journey is made more and more long and complex, and especially when we talk about cancer treatment or very serious diseases. And so when you have just one data point, you're very at risk to be inaccurate in your labeling. So what we're trying to do is to correlate information with several sources of data and several sources of IT. So for example, we're working on different type of medical reports. So for medical imaging, but also for pathology and also for biology. And we try to extract only the relevant and the pure truth of this, which is not always easy. And this clinical data is really bringing the most value on your model of AI. So basically what we're seeing more and more is that when you have just images or just medical images, for example, you try to bring less value than if you have clinical data. So basically the outcome on survival duration or things like this. So what we're trying to do is to bring more and more metadata and clinical data on the raw data. And the next point and the last point is that medical expertise is really ready to be leveraged. So basically, most of the doctors I work with, because I'm also a doctor, are very, very, eager to work with new companies and especially with startups or big corps, and trying to develop innovation and new model of AI to help them work in their daily life. So basically, this medical expertise can be leveraged in a very smart and efficient way. So that's what we're trying to do. Can you put, please, the next slide? Yeah. So basically what we have done is to build distributed platform, which is obviously GDPR compliant. So far, we're just deployed in Europe and not in the US or in Canada. And this platform is between healthcare facilities as suppliers and medtech companies or pharmaceutical labs as customers. And we index, structure, and label data with natural language processing algorithms. So basically, we're trying to work on free text and making this structured data. And we're helping our customer to collect data for AI, for research, or to develop new solutions and new innovations. If you can move to the next one, please. Yeah. So I'm going to just show you one example, which is very, very useful to some of our customers. It's an example about the patient journey in oncology. So basically, our customer wanted to deal with HCC. The problem with HCC is that the most relevant, or at least the most important information has to be collected in many, many time points. So we have the first phase, which is basically to screen the patient, where you can find some information in the reports about the etiology of the pathology, and then some different events that happen to the patient before having his first cancer. And then you have the second phase, which is to diagnose the pathology. So to diagnose, here it was HCC, so the cancer in hepatic images. So we are able to detect in the medical reports of the radiologist, for example, some lesion described with very, very precise characteristics. So we extract this information and classified it in a very structured, in a fully structured way. And the last thing is that you have all your images labeled by the radiologist you're working with. So basically, we're working only with very high expertise hospitals, and we're trying to get only the most accurate and the most valuable information. And then you can also find in the next phase, which is about treatment, the evaluation of all the doctors who are dealing with the cure of your patients. So basically, what we're trying to do is really to rebuild the full journey of this patient all over the time is going to be at the hospitals or out of the hospitals, because the good thing with medical imaging is that you can do it even if you're not sick anymore. So that's quite a good point. And the last one is that you're going to follow up your patient. So the information about the follow-up will give us some information on the clinical outcome. And this is very, very valuable for, especially for pharmaceutical firms, because you can evaluate the different modalities of your treatment, the different sequences of your treatment, and then the outcome on the survival. So what we're doing is that we bring this raw data, which can be medical images, for example, and then add some very, very accurate and very precise medical data on it and clinical data on it. And we're really thinking that this clinical data brings the more value to your data sets, because it added another information on top of the images. That's where you can find the most precise and the most accurate results on AI models. So yeah, if you can go to the next one, please. So basically what we're doing is that we're working from a full text report, and then try to build a full ontology. So we're working on French and English reports. And this ontology is made to extract only the relevant information on the text, and trying to structure it over entities. So that's full machine learning on this. And with these techniques, we are trying to make the most accurate data collection in medical data. I think that's almost done. Yeah. So if you have any question over this, I can also give you some other examples of some use case. I think it's over.
Move along to Jean, who is the Data Solutions Director at Ingedata. He's going to talk through Ingedata's annotations process, and actually has a great case study that we worked through with both Arterys and Ingedata. Go ahead, Jean.
Hi, everyone. So it's really nice to be talking to you today. So basically what we want to show you today is how to launch and scale data annotation pipelines. Yanni, maybe you can switch to the next slide, please. So basically, as Sam said, I'm a data solution director at Ingedata. So I'm basically in charge of setting up data annotation pipelines. And what we do at Ingedata is more focused on complex projects. Obviously, healthcare applications are part of the most complex projects to handle. So this is why this is extremely relevant. Can you go to the next slide, please? So why is it different when we are talking about AI in the context of healthcare applications? Obviously, those are complex projects that require vertical expertise. You need knowledge of medicine and to basically being able to analyze the data, whether it be text or images. It demands high quality, and of course, if you want to be able to commercialize your solution, it needs to be approved by certification bodies. And this is a very strong point, because it does have an influence on how you prepare your data. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is really the point that if you want to make use of your models, it needs to be approved by certification bodies. So obviously we all know the FDA in the US, but it can also be about the EMEA in Europe, or ISO certifications for being certified as a medical device. And basically what we found is that being able to explain and prove to certification bodies how you prepare your data, how you train what data you use to train your model or what data you use to validate your model has a lot of impact on, for the certification. So this is all about securing your certification process. Can you go to the next one, please? So there are basically three main options for getting your data labeled and annotated for you to be able to either train or validate your model. Obviously, you can keep it in-house, which means that you will build your own team of potentially doctors or medical students or people who are qualified for doing the job. It might imply some new recruitment, and obviously, I would say that one of the difficulties in this context would be to being able to industrialize this process, because obviously it enters into a context where time is important, money is important, and industrialization of this annotation process is important. And it's not part of the core business of an AI developer, for example. Then you can obviously do crowdsourcing or outsourcing, which is very good when you find a company that proposes services that really match with what you're looking for. I would say that then you need to really try to get understanding and control on what's going on and how it's being done, so you will get the right justifications for certification bodies. And then the last option, which is basically the one we are working on, is about getting more customized data annotation pipelines, where basically clients have access to people with medical skills, medical students, doctors, radiologists, and also industrialization of the process. And all of this must be well documented, recorded in terms of production events and how you frame the projects to be able to find the right arguments for the health certification bodies. Can you go to the next one, please? So basically what we are trying to do is to work on these three P's, the three pillars of a good data annotation pipeline, which is about getting the right team to work on your data, plus finding the right annotation platform, and finally having them to work following very safe and resilient processes. And to do that in the context of getting their products certified by health certification bodies, we try to also make the most of an ecosystem where we get the backup from experts. So we have a center of expertise with radiologists, with ophthalmologists, or other type of specialists, to make sure that everything that is decided in terms of team, platform, or processes fits with the best practices and the expectations from health certification bodies. Can you go to the next one, please? So concretely, when we worked together with Arturis, so we have been working on segmentation and basically annotation tasks for different types of images. Here I'm going to be talking about cardiac MRI segmentation, where we basically built a team that was up to 7 full-time doctors. They were all backed by one radiologist who was acting as a support person at Ingedata, and who was also providing the training of the team. They were all working from one production center, so you have very good control on what's going on, and you have access to support departments, for example, for HR, training, or operations. And we went through around 1,000 cases together with Arterys that were prepared by Ingedata, following requirements that were built together with Arterys. Can you go to the next one, please? Here is kind of a macro view of the process we believe needs to be followed to be able to frame a project, to launch it, and then to scale it. There are 4 phases to this process. There's the first phase, which is about discovering what you need. Then once you have discovered and challenged what needs to be done, objectified it, and synthesized it into some instruction manuals, you can go to prototyping phase, where basically the solution, so the combination of the people, the processes, and the platform will be tested. So I tried to highlight some kind of key moments that we had together with Arturis. And obviously for the discovery phase, we had one big step, which was about getting objectified tasks and clearly knowing what we need to find in the data. At prototyping phase, one key moment was about implementing the tool with simplified data exchanges. When we started production, which was the phase 3, we obviously got the validation that the process was working well, and we started working using sprints internally. So it helped us also entering into a continuous improvement process to finally scale the project. Scaling the project was both well, there are two ways of scaling a project, basically. Either you just grow the volume of data that you want to get. So this is about increasing the team and always making sure that the people who join the current team are qualified for the job. The second thing is about increasing the complexity and the amount of information that you extract from the data. And this is another process that was also added, where basically the annotators were continuously trained together with the learning curve at adding new metadata or new types of segmentations to the data. So can you go to the next one, please? So as key takeaways to this work on the methodology to build data annotation pipelines, basically healthcare applications do require special measures because it's something that puts people at stake and that is very serious. You need to keep in mind the criteria that will get you a certification by health certification bodies. You have different options. All are feasible, but you really need to see which one is the most fit for your need, considering the 3 Ps, which are the people, the processes, and the platform. There are many cases where companies that need data annotation will only think about the people. Okay, what people do I need for it? But you really should consider the processes you follow and how you make sure that the quality is controlled, and the platform that you use in order to get a solid data annotation pipeline. And finally, to scale the project, you always need to monitor the learning curve of the annotators to make sure that when you ask them more or when you grow the team, the people are ready to do it. And this is also key to the project. So this is it for me. And obviously, if you have more questions, I'll be happy to answer them at Q&A session.
Thank you, Joe. All right, so we'll jump over to Matt. Matt is a Director of Product AI at GE Healthcare. Matt, please take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. I am at GE now, but actually am an Arterys alum and spent some time there. So thanks for setting this up, Sam. It is really great to hear from everybody. So I'm going to talk about deploying AI and try to relate that back to data decisions early on and sort of all of the steps that Erik, Marie, and Jean talked about, all build up to deploying it. And so I'm going to talk about the end goal and the end sort of state, but relate it back to the beginning. So if we can go to the next slide. So to really start down that path and connect the worlds, it becomes really salient when you're deploying AI, but sort of drives your data decisions early on, as well as what is the problem that you're really trying to solve. I'm going to keep this imaging focused, but I think a lot of this context probably is applicable within sort of any healthcare application that you're thinking of. But within the radiology and imaging world, like most problems can be bucketed into efficiency, quality, or sort of like burnout or staff issues. And when you're building your model, thinking about what the end goal is, who the customer is, really informs a lot of data decisions early on. If you're driving for, quality, bounding boxes are probably not the right curation method. You probably want pixel-wise segmentations. if you're driving towards efficiency and the goal of the model is maybe quick triage, maybe a bounding box is okay. And certainly all of these decisions have data science implications as well. But remembering what you're trying to solve really should inform your data strategy up front. And so I just wanted to like set context there as I go forward about deployment strategies. But really those are sort of the big buckets, and knowing how your model will be used or how your product will be used should constantly be evaluated as you're curating and amassing data. We can jump to the next slide. Specifically, when you've got a model or product that you'd like to deploy, I think there are a couple big questions that you need to ask. And again, this has a lot of repercussions to early stages of data and product development as well. But what's the clinical workflow that you're going to integrate into? And I think what I have found, and you know, hopefully this mirrors others' experiences as well, that the clinical workflows that radiologists, technologists are used to are hard to break. And so finding ways to fit within them is usually a better strategy for success. And so like where you will be integrated, will it be during image acquisition? Is it pre-acquisition, post-acquisition? Is it in PACS or RIS that you'll actually have your results consumed? Will it be in the EMR? Thinking about that will help define, again, what annotations, what type of data you need. And so sort of knowing that early on, as well as how you'll integrate into those systems, make a big difference between being successful and not. And so I think that's one metric to keep track of. The next one feels technical, but has a lot of implications as well. So where does your compute happen? So are you embedded within a medical device itself? Are you on premise and using hospital infrastructure to actually compute where your model will, you know, do inference and produce a result? Will you be sending images, information to the cloud, using the scalable compute within the cloud to actually produce a result? And the reason I think this matters is, one, it really defines a lot of the product and like, again, the integration patterns, but also it has implications for your data science approach. If you're going to be embedded, you probably need a model architecture that is light, which again probably has different data and curation implications up front. So sort of having an idea as to where the compute will happen and where you integrate in is so important. And then I think the last thing is, how do you measure success? One of the biggest issues, especially with deep learning, but maybe, you know, machine learning overall, is we can get really good results in a situation where we are controlling the test set or controlling the curation, but we don't always know if that generalizes to other situations. So as you launch a product, how do you track back the data that you're receiving in the wild or in clinical use back to your training environment, and figuring out if they are the same distribution or not, if they have different attributes that sort of highlight maybe a brittle portion of how your model is set up. So I think finding a strategy to track the data and the results that you have in the wild back to your training environment so you can understand if you've been successful or not is really an important part of deploying AI. Let me jump to the next slide. So on the GE side, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight this. We're sort of building out a platform that we call Edison to sort of help embed solutions into GE devices, or we have on-premise compute, as well as we've got some cloud solutions that I'll highlight as well. Certainly we've got one in partnership with Arturis. And so we're trying to systematically tackle this within GE, as well as provide that as a channel for developers to potentially use as well. So that's something I want to highlight. But I'm going to go through a couple of GE examples really quickly to highlight those three pieces that I talked about on deployment and what that looks like in the real world. So let me jump. So an example here is we've got deep learning models that do CT image reconstruction. So actually improving the quality of a CT image as it's acquired. And so to answer sort of the questions I posed before, where is this integrated in the workflow? So this is, the borderline between pre and post acquisition. It actually does the image reconstruction or part of it itself. It's actually, from a compute standpoint, it sits on an on-premise set of compute that we call an Edison Health Link, but it's not embedded in the device. It's disconnected, but it happens on-premise. And so as we were building this model and thinking through it, all of those things played into sort of the data curation level and data set gathering portion of the product development. And so that's like one example of what deploying AI could look like. I'll jump to a couple more. Next slide would be great. Another example here is what we call our MR AirX solution. And what this provides is, if people are familiar with MR workflows, during acquisition, the technologist needs to actually define a plane of acquisition to make sure that the images are in line with a person actually sitting within an MR, and also in line with the anatomy that they're trying to take images of. And so this is actually a time-consuming process. And so to connect this back to the original point, this is an efficiency product and set of models. Because it's efficiency in defining a plane, the detail on segmentation for curation is something that we could alter to best meet velocity of amassing training data as well as overall performance. The solution is actually embedded in a MR device itself. And so we then took the models that we had and then optimized them for the hardware that sits on the MR devices themselves. So we worked tightly with Intel on this. And so overall, the end deployment state and the model's purpose really defined a lot of things up front from a data perspective and also from a model architecture perspective. So again, the deployment and end result really can inform some early stage thoughts. Let me jump to the next one. This is an Xray solution we had that detects critical chest Xray conditions. Right now it's focused on pneumothorax, which is a collapsed lung for people that aren't clinicians. What's interesting here is this is embedded in an Xray, and the user in the use case there is a technologist, but it's also being consumed in the PACS world. And the user there is a radiologist. And so different use cases with the same set of models and product. And that's something that we should really, again, keep track of early on. And then let me jump to the last example here. So this is Arturis and sort of branded Vios works through GE, but a tight collaboration between Arturis and GE has existed for a while. And what's interesting here is the consumption is in the cloud, and I'm sure people on the call are very familiar with Arturis, but that enables things like very easily tracking performance of models and usage of models. And so not only is there scalable compute, but there's a ton of other benefits. That also means that things like cardiac MR that are very compute intensive can have models that are equally compute intensive because you've got scalable compute in the cloud. And so again, early stage decisions can be informed by actually where you deploy things. Those are a quick set of examples. Let me just jump to the last piece, and then I'm sure we all want to jump to the panel portion of this. So on the GE side, we've got the Edison platform that I highlighted, and also a developer program that, in summary, is a way to take advantage of GE's install base and sort of different compute environments and allow you to take models and products that you have and actually use GE as a commercial channel. And so we've got our Edison developer program that sort of speaks to that. And if anybody's ever interested in that, please just ask questions or reach out after the session here. With that, I will stop.
Thanks, Matt. So we'll move to Q&A portion. We have just about 12, 13 minutes. So we probably have all the questions we can get to at this point, but we'll have a link at the end for everybody towards our Slack space where we can continue the conversation. So yeah, we can go to that first question, Marie. These are questions that folks submitted as registered for the webinar. So this first one pertains to privacy laws. So do privacy laws pose challenges from sharing images for annotation with doctors who are not directly caring for the patient? And how do you solve those challenges? So let's start it back at the beginning, Erik. I think this might be an interesting question for you. And rest of the panelists, please chime in if you have thoughts along the way.
Yeah, we actually see a lot of different takes on how to anonymize images before sharing them. So on our platform, currently we require that all images are already anonymized, but clients have very differing opinions on what sufficient anonymization is. So we see all sorts of efforts to say scrape information like metadata off of a DICOM, and the thinking is that that's enough, and there's other automated methods to sort of look at the image and see if there's other identifiers. But at the end of the day, we've seen several instances where something just inevitably slips through the crack. That's a tough problem. So we actually have been looking into this problem and thinking about whether there's something we can do there, since we are having, experts review images at an extremely high volume. We're actually wondering if we should adapt ourselves to help provide services to do anonymization, because we've seen so much confusion among developers and people who are sourcing data about what enough anonymization is. So, I don't know that that's the best answer now, other than to say that we're also asking ourselves this question, and we see lots of clients ask themselves this question. And we've also seen lots of people who think their data is more anonymized than it is. So it's definitely an interesting area and an important issue.
Jean-Marie, Matt, I don't know if you all have anything you want to add on there. I'm sure you all have encountered interesting challenges here too.
Yeah, I think their privacy laws are always something that you need to keep track of throughout this process. Everything from the development stage to even the testing phase, and like within different geographies in like different countries and sections of countries, right? There are different laws. GDPR is like a really set of very clean guidelines, but that have really big repercussions. So I think there's no overarching good answer here, other than in any case, this case in particular, where you're sharing images potentially for annotation or to a clinician that isn't directly caring for the patient, or in many other ones, it's hard to have an overarching answer, other than you really need to keep track of the country of origins rules around the data, as well as wherever you're doing and each use case. I wish there was a clean answer, but it needs to be sort of evaluated.
Jean or Marie, we can move on to the next question as well.
Well, I can add some stuff about this, because we're very in the GDPR of things in Europe, and especially in France. We're based in Paris, so we have the French regulation about anonymization and things like this. To come back to your question, we just shunt a little bit these issues, because we're using existing data. So basically, the annotation that we produce are made from the doctors that take care of the patients. So basically we don't have this problem, but we have some other problems about anonymization or de-identification. I think there's one of the questions in the Q&A which is about this issues, and probably we can come back to this thing. But the good point with GDPR is that we have very, very clear guidelines, as you've said before. So basically, we just have to define why the data is used, what is the final goal of it, and what is the role of each stakeholder in it. So basically, there's a data producer, which is usually also the data controller, and then we are the data processor. So basically, this definition of roles is very clear. And when you say and define what you're doing with the data and what is the goal that you're aiming for, it's not so much a problem to deal with personal data, and especially with medical personal data. But it's really a point that you have to define it very, very clearly, and especially in your contracts. And that's also a kind of well, something that we're doing, but I didn't explain it so much in the presentation. But there's really a need to be a trusted third person between healthcare facilities, so basically those who produce the data and those who use it. And we're also trying to do this kind of, trust issues between all the parties. So yeah, that's a big problem. Anyway.
Yeah. Thanks, Marie. I'm going to chime in with one question from the live Q&A, which is, I'll direct over to you, Jean, which is, it says, what do you think is the main challenge within your current workflows for data annotations? Is there anything that's missing today?
I think an important challenge is to be able to grow the learning curve quickly enough for annotators to be very operational, and to monitor how this learning curve goes for them to be able to then keep increasing the value that they deliver in terms of annotations. Obviously, no one is both qualitative and efficient from day one. And it is very important to keep that in mind, to keep tracking what's going on and how it's being done, to basically identify where are the improvement leverages. And this is not only for launch phase, it's for scaling phase as well, and it's for adding more tasks to the annotation, the global annotation projects. So I think this is a major challenge that obviously takes a lot of energy to be able to record and understand what's going on and how to improve it.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. I know, Erik, I mean, you guys have spent a lot of time building out tooling to sort of solve some of those challenges. And you and Ingedata sort of have approaches from opposite ends of the spectrum to solving some of the problems with annotations. I don't know if there's anything you want to build on with there.
Yeah, I think by virtue of our different approaches, our biggest challenge is sort of the opposite side there. So some of what I touched on in our presentation, the scaling phase for us is actually quite smooth. The hard part for us is more the scoping phase and making sure that we have a strong understanding of what quality is. But once we have achieved that and sort of gotten through the first initial pilot, scaling and maintaining accuracy is, that's what I'd say the strength of our approach is. But the difficulty is, this process of engaging with clients and the labelers to really, determine gold standards, identify threshold cases, identify edge cases, different problems that are going to come up with the data, just things that you don't expect early on. But once those are settled, scaling our annotators and growing a skilled workforce is a strength of our approach. So as a result of the different approaches, it's sort of, there's different strengths and weaknesses.
I mean, there's trade-offs with every approach. I'd like to chime in with an add-on there for all of you, which just goes to sort of the fundamental question of how do you identify these edge cases? Is it really just a brute force effort trying to trim down, identify and trim down the number of existing or unidentified edge cases as much as possible? Or is there actually some sort of framework or tips or tricks you'd recommend to the audience? Why don't I direct that at one of you? I'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah, I think that it is, at least from my perspective, a sort of maybe two-pronged approach, which is you rack your brain, you talk to as many clinicians as possible. If you're lucky to be a clinician like Marie, maybe you're better at generating some of those edge cases, but talk to as many knowledgeable people as possible up front to identify what the edge cases could be. And then second, and I think this is probably true for all product development or all model development, healthcare, not healthcare, which is see if you can find safe places where you can test this in a known research mode, because there's so much you learn from actually getting things into the wild that are either edge cases or just base assumptions that you got wrong. So I think between those two things, that's the best way of going about it. Even if your model isn't ready, getting it out there in a safe way is the best way to sort of get feedback and then to feed your data cycle overall.
We got less than 60 seconds. Anybody have a lightning addition? Marie, any final tips or tricks, words of wisdom related to identifying edge cases?
Well, no, I think the last answer was the most complete about this. You have to test and to ask and to listen to all the stakeholders of others. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I don't want to make folks late. I'm sure that there are other meetings and things to attend. Let's jump to that last slide, second to last slide. Thank you all panelists for attending and joining. Really appreciate you all taking the time to do this today. Time is obviously at a premium, and we appreciate it very much. We can go to that last one, So we didn't get as much time as I was hoping for open Q&A, but everybody on here, all the panelists are on our Slack community. I also have some angry dogs, sorry everyone. But you can log into that Slack community via this link, bit.ly/Arturis, and identify everyone on there if you want to keep some conversations going. Thank you everybody for attending. Take care and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks to you for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sam.